On an autumn afternoon, a gentle breeze blew through the small town of Maplewood, Pennsylvania. Emily Harrison walked briskly down the corridor of St. Mary's Hospital, checking her watch. 3 o'clock. It was time to pick up her son Jacob from school. Her face showed the fatigue of daily life as a single mother working while raising a child, but when she thought of her son, her expression naturally softened. "Emily, good work today." "You're leaving early today," called out Sarah, a fellow nurse. Emily smiled as she replied, "I have to pick up Jacob. Sometimes my mother comes to help, but today it's my turn." That boy is already 6 years old now. Time flies so fast. As she said this, Emily was remembering 3 years ago. Her divorce from her husband David had been finalized, and she had moved near her parents' home with her son. She had been full of anxiety at the time, but thanks to her parents' support, she was able to start a new life. Especially her mother Margaret, drawing on her experience as a former elementary school teacher, often helped take care of Jacob. As Emily drove, she was thinking about her mother's recent behavior. Margaret still doted on her grandson as always, but sometimes she showed a tired expression. Her father Robert seemed to speak less than before. Emily thought he was probably just not used to life after retirement. When she parked in front of Maplewood Elementary School, Jacob came out with the other children. Her blonde, blue-eyed son resembled his father, but he had also inherited Emily's features. His smile especially looked just like Emily's. "Mommy!" Jacob ran over and jumped into Emily's arms. As she hugged his small body, Emily felt the happiness of being a mother. No matter how difficult the days were, she could keep going because of moments like this. "How was school today?" "I got 100 on my math test. The teacher praised me." "That's wonderful. Let's tell Grandpa and Grandma too." In the car, Jacob happily talked about what happened that day. About the craft project he made with his classmate Tommy, how delicious the chicken nuggets at lunch were, and how he scored 2 goals playing soccer during PE. Emily listened to her son's stories while driving, occasionally responding with encouraging sounds. When they arrived home, Margaret was already waiting. With her grained hair neatly arranged and her usual gentle smile, she was very good with children from her 30 years of experience as a teacher. "Jacob, welcome home. How was your day?" "Grandma, I got 100 on my test." Margaret hugged her grandson, showing a genuinely happy expression. For Emily, her mother's presence was truly invaluable. On days when work ran late, or when she felt like collapsing from illness, Margaret always helped her. "Good work today, Emily. Was it tough?" "The usual. But having you here really helps me so much, Mom." Margaret smiled and began preparing tea in the kitchen. As Emily watched her mother's back, she was filled with gratitude. After the divorce, her anxiety about raising a child alone had been overwhelming, but she was able to overcome it thanks to her family support. Her father Robert also had more time since retirement, so he spent more time with Jacob. True to his meticulous nature as a former banker, he seemed to enjoy teaching his grandson math and doing garden work together. Jacob was also fond of his grandfather, and every weekend he would visit his grandparents' house without fail. Emily believed without doubt that this peaceful daily life would continue forever. The whole family was healthy, her son was growing up well, and both parents were watching over their grandson's growth. Though there were hardships as a single mother, with the support around her, she was able to live a sufficiently happy life. In early October, when Emily returned from work, Jacob was sitting alone in the living room. He was supposed to be spending time at his grandparents' house as usual, but for some reason he was at home. "Jacob, why are you here alone? Where are Grandpa and Grandma?" Her son shrugged his small shoulders as he answered, "Grandpa told me to go home." Emily frowned. Her parents usually doted on Jacob very much. Especially her mother Margaret treasured the time spent with her grandson above all else. So why had they sent him home early today? Did something unpleasant happen? No, Jacob shook his head, but his expression was somehow clouded. Grandpa and Grandma were talking in loud voices. Emily sat next to her son and gently put her arm around his shoulder. Were they fighting? I don't know. But Grandma was crying. That night, Emily called her mother. Margaret's voice sounded more tired than usual. Jacob came home early today. Did something happen? On the other end of the phone, Margaret paused before answering. It's nothing serious. My husband was just in a bit of a bad mood. He seems to be stressed since retirement. Dad was. But Jacob said you were crying. That child worries too much. I'm fine. Really? However, there was no conviction in Margaret's voice. Emily felt uneasy, but she couldn't press further. The following week, Emily had consecutive night shifts at the hospital. Margaret looked after Jacob almost every day, but changes began to appear in her son's behavior. He no longer looked forward to going to his grandparents' house as before, and sometimes he would wake up in the middle of the night from nightmares. Mommy, do I have to go to Grandpa's house this weekend? On Friday night, Jacob asked shyly. Emily was surprised. Her son was supposed to be very fond of his grandparents, especially his grandfather Robert. Why? Didn't you like playing with Grandpa? Yes, but... Jacob hesitated. Grandpa has been acting strange lately. Strange? What do you mean? Her son shook his head. I can't explain it well. But it's scary. Emily lifted her son onto her lap. What could be happening at the grandparents' house that would make a 6-year-old child feel scared? However, caught up in work busyness, she couldn't find time to ask in detail. The following Wednesday, Margaret suddenly called. Emily answered the phone in the hospital break room. Emily, I need to talk to you about something. Her mother's voice was shaking. Emily became worried. What's wrong, Mom? It's about your father. He's been acting very strange lately. He stays up late into the night often, and sometimes he talks to himself. And... Margaret cut off her words. And what? He's become irritable. He shouts loudly over trivial things, and sometimes he throws things. Anxiety spread through Emily's chest. Dad does. I can't believe it. Robert certainly had meticulous and strict aspects, but he wasn't a violent person. During his banking days, he was respected by colleagues, and at home he was a gentle husband and father. It might be dementia. But when I suggest going to the hospital, he gets extremely angry. Mom, have you ever felt in danger? After a long silence, Margaret answered in a small voice, just once. Last Sunday, he grabbed my arm hard. Emily gasped. Were you hurt? Just a bruise. But Emily, this isn't like your father. There must be some reason. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. Her mother's story and Jacob's changes were beginning to connect in her mind. Perhaps her son's fear of his grandfather was because he had witnessed something. The next day, Emily decided to leave work early and visit her parents' house. Jacob was scheduled to go to his grandparents' house after returning from school as usual. Around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Emily parked in front of her parents' house. The 30-year-old White House had maintained the same warm atmosphere from when she was a child. But today, something was different. When she opened the front door, she could hear her father's loud voice from the living room. I've told you over and over. This happened because of you. Emily stopped in her tracks. It was the first time she had heard her father shout so violently. Robert, please. Lower your voice. It's time for Jacob to come. Her mother's voice was trembling. Emily quietly moved down the hallway and peered at the situation from behind the living room door. Robert was standing in front of her mother, waving both hands while talking about something. Margaret was sitting in a chair, covering her face with both hands. That child isn't unrelated to this either. Because you say unnecessary things, it becomes so complicated. I haven't said anything. But it's true that Jacob is frightened. What does a child know? At that moment, Robert roughly grabbed Margaret's shoulder. Margaret let out a small scream. Emily was about to cry out, but at that instant, she heard the sound of the front door opening. Jacob had come home from school. "I'm home." When her son's bright voice echoed, the living room suddenly became quiet. Robert hastily let go of his hands, and Margaret quickly wiped away her tears. Emily hurried to the entrance to greet her son. "Jacob, welcome home." "Mommy. Why are you here?" "I came to see Grandpa and Grandma." At that moment, Robert and Margaret came out of the living room. Robert was making a smile as if nothing had happened. "Oh, Jacob. How was school?" However, Jacob stood hiding behind Emily. Despite seeing his grandfather smile, her son's body was trembling slightly. "I'm going home with Mommy today," Jacob said in a small voice. Robert's expression clouded for a moment. "Why?" "You can stay and have dinner as usual." "He seems tired today," Emily answered protectively. "We'll visit again another time." On the way home, Emily asked her son, "Jacob, did something unpleasant happen at Grandpa's house? Tell me honestly." Her son was quiet for a long time, but eventually answered in a small voice. "I saw Grandpa hitting Grandma." Emily's heart nearly stopped. "When?" "Last Sunday. When I came back from the bathroom. Grandpa noticed me and said, 'This is our secret.'" Her son's small shoulders were shaking. Emily pulled the car over to the side of the road and hugged her son. "Jacob, thank you for telling me. You don't have to go to Grandpa's house alone anymore." That night, Emily called her mother many times, but no one answered. She decided to visit her parents' house again early the next morning. However, before that, fate began to move dramatically. On Thursday morning, as Emily was preparing to go to work, the phone rang. The caller was Robert. "Emily, I'm thinking of going out with Jacob, just the two of us today. I'd like to check out the new park that opened." Emily hesitated. After hearing her son's story yesterday, she was anxious about leaving him alone with her father. "Dad, actually. Don't worry. Men need time together too. We'll be back in the afternoon." The phone was hung up abruptly. Emily hurriedly called the school to confirm that the grandfather would be picking up Jacob. However, the uneasiness in her chest didn't disappear. At 3:15 p.m., Emily's cell phone rang. She was working in the pediatric ward of the hospital, organizing patient charts at the nurses' station. "Is this Emily Harrison?" "This is the emergency department at Maplewood General Hospital." At that moment, Emily's blood drained from her face. It was a call from the hospital where she worked. "Your son Jacob has been in a traffic accident. Please come immediately." When the call ended, Emily's hands began to shake. Her colleague Sarah rushed over. "Emily, what's wrong? Your face is completely pale." "Jacob was in an accident." She couldn't say any more. Emily hurried to the elevator and headed to the emergency department. The distance that usually took less than 3 minutes felt like an eternity today. When she arrived at the emergency department, Dr. Chen, the attending physician, greeted her. "Ms. Harrison, Jacob is unconscious but his life is not in danger. He has minor bruising on his head and a broken left arm." Emily sighed with relief, but immediately another worry crossed her mind. How did the accident happen? "He appears to have been hit by a right-turning car while crossing the crosswalk with your father. Your father has only minor bruises and has already been questioned by the police." Emily hurried to her son's bedside. Jacob was lying in a small bed with an oxygen mask on. His left arm was in a cast, and his forehead was wrapped in bandages. It was completely different from her usually active son, quiet and frail. "Jacob," Emily gently took her son's right hand. "It's Mommy. It's okay, I'm here." After a while, Jacob's eyelids began to flutter. Eventually, his blue eyes slowly opened. "Mommy." "Yes, Jacob. Mommy is here." Her son looked around and seemed to understand that he was in the hospital. However, his expression showed confusion. "Mommy, I had a scary dream. It's okay now. You were in an accident, but you don't have any serious injuries." Jacob gripped his mother's hand tightly. Then he suddenly became serious. "Mommy, Grandma can't come here." Emily was puzzled by her son's words. "Why? Grandma is worried about you." "No, she can't. If Grandma comes, she'll take me away." "Take you away? Where?" Jacob shook his head. "I don't know. But Grandpa said so. He said Grandma is trying to take me and Mommy away." Emily was confused. Her son's words sounded incoherent. Perhaps he was confused from hitting his head. "Jacob, Grandma loves you. She wouldn't take you away." However, her son's expression was filled with anxiety. "Really? Really? Grandma is?" At that moment, the hospital room door slowly opened. Margaret entered with careful steps. Her face was distorted with worry and sadness. Perhaps she had been crying since last night. Her eyes were red and swollen. "Jacob," Margaret called out in a small voice. "It's Grandma. Are you okay?" At that instant, Jacob's expression completely changed. His eyes widened and his body stiffened. Then, desperately gripping Emily's hand, he said in a trembling voice, "Mommy, run." Emily was surprised by her son's reaction. Jacob was clearly feeling fear when he saw his grandmother. "Jacob, it's okay. It's Grandma." However, her son shook his head violently. "No. That's not Grandma." Margaret showed a hurt expression at her son's reaction. "Jacob, it's Grandma. Don't you recognize me? Stop. Don't come closer." Jacob screamed. The heart rate monitor began beeping faster. Emily frantically tried to calm her son. "Jacob, calm down. Grandma isn't a scary person." "That's a lie. Grandpa said so. He said Grandma is a bad person and will take me and Mommy away." Margaret was stunned by her son's words. "Robert said such things. Grandpa said it's Grandma's fault that the family is messed up." Jacob cried as he shouted. Emily was beginning to understand the situation. Her father had been filling her son's head with something. Moreover, content that made his mother out to be the villain. "Mom, could you step outside for a moment?" Emily asked quietly. Margaret nodded sadly and left the room. Her son's heart rate finally began to settle. "Jacob, what else did Grandpa say?" Her son answered while sniffling. "He said Grandma is trying to take my insurance money. And that when I die, she'll take that money and go somewhere with Mommy." Emily's blood froze. If insurance money was being mentioned, this might not be a simple accident. "Do you remember anything about the accident?" Jacob shook his head. "I don't remember. But I remember Grandpa saying now everything will work out." "When?" "In the car. Before we went to the park." Emily hugged her son. Everything was becoming clear. Her father was trying to use her son to get insurance money. And by making her mother out to be the villain, he was trying to hide his own plan. "Mommy, am I going to die?" Jacob asked anxiously. "You won't die. I absolutely won't let you die, Emily answered firmly. And I will definitely protect you from anyone who tries to hurt you. At that moment, the hospital room door opened again. This time 2 police officers entered. Miss Harrison, could we have a moment of your time? We have some questions about the accident. Emily kissed her son's forehead and stood up. Jacob, I'm going outside for a moment, but I'll be right back. A nurse will be nearby, so you'll be fine. In the hallway, one of the police officers began to speak. Actually, there are several questionable points about this accident. According to witness testimony, your father was pulling your child's hand forcefully just before the accident. Pulling forcefully? Yes. It appeared as if he was trying to lead him to a dangerous place. Emily remembered her son's words. Her grandfather's words, now everything will work out. The talk about insurance money. And the scheme to make her mother the villain. Where is my father now? He's receiving treatment in another hospital room. However, there were many contradictions in his responses during questioning, and we're currently investigating in detail. Emily made up her mind. The time had come to tell the truth to protect her son and mother. There's something I'd like to tell you. This accident may not have been accidental. The next morning, Jacob's condition was stable. The swelling in his head had gone down, and his consciousness was clearer. Emily had spent the entire night at her son's bedside, and when the morning light streamed into the hospital room, she finally sighed with relief. Mommy, I'm hungry. Hearing Jacob's normal voice, Emily almost cried. Unlike yesterday's expression filled with fear, healthy color had returned to her son's face. I'll have them bring breakfast. At that moment, there was a light knock on the hospital room door. Detective Johnson from yesterday poked his head in. Good morning, Miss Harrison. How is Jacob feeling? Much better. Thank you. Detective Johnson looked at her son. How are you feeling, Jacob? I'm okay, her son answered a little shyly. Can you remember what happened yesterday? Before going to the park. Jacob looked at his mother. Emily nodded encouragingly. Grandpa came to pick me up in the car, her son began to speak carefully. But we didn't go to the park. Where did you go? Somewhere I didn't know. It was near a big road. Detective Johnson took notes in his notebook. At that time, was Grandpa saying anything? Jacob thought hard. He said, today everything will be over. And then, don't tell Grandma and Mommy. Emily squeezed her son's hand. Her son's memories, which had been confused yesterday, seemed to be gradually becoming clearer. Do you remember anything else? Grandpa was crying, Jacob said in a small voice. He said, sorry, Jacob, while crying. Detective Johnson and Emily looked at each other. This was clearly a planned act. Jacob, just one more thing. Do you remember when you were crossing the street? Her son shook his head. I don't remember. When I woke up, I was here. The detective closed his notebook. Thank you, Jacob. You're very brave. After leaving the hospital room, Detective Johnson explained the situation to Emily. There are major contradictions between your father's testimony and your child's story. Your father claims that he was playing with his grandson at the park and accidentally had an accident on the way home, but actually they were in a completely different location. And last night, when we searched your father's house, we found important evidence. The detective took out an envelope. This was discovered in your father's study. Emily was shocked when she saw the contents of the envelope. Inside were copies of Jacob's life insurance policy and documents related to insurance claim procedures. Furthermore, there were many debt collection notices. Your father had substantial gambling debts. A total of about $500,000. An amount that could never be repaid with just his pension. Emily looked at the documents with trembling hands. The insurance money. Jacob's life insurance is for $1 million. Your father is listed as the beneficiary. Anger welled up in Emily's chest. Her own father had tried to turn her grandson's life into money. But why did he try to make my mother the villain? There's an explanation for that too. The detective showed her another document. There are records that your mother had consulted with a lawyer about your father's debts. She was trying to proceed with divorce proceedings. Emily was surprised. She didn't know her mother was thinking about such things. Your father was afraid of his wife leaving him. If she divorced him, he might lose the house in property division. So he made a plan to get the insurance money and then pin the blame on your mother. How? By making Jacob believe that your mother was a bad person, he was trying to create a story that your mother was targeting her grandson. After the accident, we believe he intended to testify that my wife was targeting our grandson's insurance money and forced me to commit the crime. Emily was speechless. She felt nauseous at the despicable nature of her father's plan. At that moment, Margaret was walking down the hallway from the other end. She had been at the hospital since last night and looked exhausted. Emily, how is Jacob? Much better, Emily hugged her mother. Mom, I'm sorry. Yesterday our son reacted like that. Margaret shook her head. That child isn't to blame. I can roughly imagine what Robert put into his head. When Detective Johnson explained the situation, Margaret shed tears. I had a feeling something was wrong. Robert's behavior had been strange lately. Calculating something alone in the middle of the night, and the way he looked at Jacob had changed. Why didn't you tell me? I had no evidence. And I never imagined he would do something to his own grandson. Margaret choked on her words. The detective continued. Actually, the evidence that your mother secretly recorded became the decisive factor in this arrest. Margaret looked surprised. My records. The photos and diary you kept as evidence of domestic violence. Also, the record of your appointment to consult with Child Protective Services. Emily looked at her mother. Mom, you were bearing this all alone. I wanted to protect you and Jacob. But I didn't know what to do. The three returned to the hospital room and decided to tell Jacob the truth. It was difficult content for a 6-year-old child, but they shouldn't pile on more lies. Jacob, Emily took her son's hand. There's something important we need to talk about regarding Grandpa. Her son looked at his mother with a serious expression. Grandpa was sick. A sickness of the heart. That's why he thought about hurting you and Grandma. Is Grandpa a bad person? Emily chose her words carefully. He tried to do bad things, but it was because of his illness. But that doesn't make it acceptable. What about Grandma? Margaret approached her son's bed. Grandma loves you. I won't take you away. I've always wanted to protect you and Mommy. Jacob stared intently at his grandmother's face. Then he reached out his small hand. Grandma, I'm sorry. I was scared yesterday. Margaret took her grandson's hand and shed tears. You did nothing wrong. I'm sorry for making you feel scared. In the afternoon, Dr. Chen came by. Jacob, you can go home now. But you need to rest for a while. Emily put her son in a wheelchair and left the hospital. Margaret was with them too. The three of them would now begin a new life. In the car, Jacob asked, Mommy, what's going to happen to us now? Emily looked at her son through the rearview mirror. The three of us will live together. Grandma will be with us too. What about Grandpa? Grandpa will be in a special place for a while to treat his illness. Jacob nodded quietly. In his 6-year-old way, he seemed to be trying to understand the situation. Margaret turned around. Jacob, the scary things are over now. From now on, you'll be safe. Her son smiled. It was the first time she had seen such a relieved smile. Emily thought as she drove. Her father's betrayal had left deep wounds, but the family bond had become stronger. She had learned painfully about the importance of facing the truth. And she had also learned what a real family truly means. 1 year later, Emily, Jacob, and Margaret were greeting a peaceful morning in their new home. The small house in a quiet residential area slightly away from central Maplewood had become a true sanctuary for the three of them. "Grandma, I'll help with the pancakes." 7-year-old Jacob stood next to Margaret in the kitchen, trying to crack eggs with his small hands. A year had passed since that accident, and her son's smile had become much brighter than before. With the help of child psychologist Dr. Lin, whom he visited twice a month, he rarely had nightmares anymore. "You're good at this, Jacob. You've become skilled at cooking." There was deep peace in Margaret's voice. At 63, she had finished her divorce proceedings and was free from a violent marriage. She continued weekly counseling sessions and was gradually recovering from the fear and guilt she had carried for years. Having changed her hairstyle and begun wearing brighter colored clothes, she seemed like a different person, full of life. Emily listened to her family's conversation while reading the newspaper. This morning's article contained a follow-up report on her father Robert's sentencing. He had been sentenced to 15 years in prison for attempted premeditated murder and child abuse. Mental evaluation revealed gambling addiction and severe depression, but this did not lighten his sentence. For Emily, her feelings toward her father were complex. Hatred and sadness were mixed together, but gradually they were being sorted out over time. Family therapist Dr. Smith had taught her that forgiving and forgetting are different things. Emily was learning to forgive her father, but she would never forget. "Mommy, let's go to the park today," Jacob suggested while stuffing pancakes into his mouth. "That sounds good. Let's go together with Grandma." The three of them had started going out together about 6 months ago. At first, Jacob was afraid of crowds and didn't want to leave Emily's side. However, through Margaret's patient love and Emily's consistent support, her son gradually opened his heart to the outside world. At the park, Jacob was playing energetically with other children. Emily and Margaret sat on a bench, watching over their son. "That child has really become strong," Margaret said with a smile. "Thanks to you, Mom. Without you, we couldn't have recovered this far." Margaret took her daughter's hand. "We supported each other. That's what a real family looks like." The two reflected on the difficult journey of this past year. Testifying in court, counseling sessions, countless nights comforting Jacob when he cried out in the middle of the night. However, having overcome all of that, the three were bound by an even deeper bond. "Mommy, Grandma, look." Jacob was waving from the swing. There was no longer any shadow of fear in that smile. Emily stood up and waved back at her son. And she quietly vowed in her heart. She would continue to protect this child, and her mother, forever. In the evening, when they returned home, there was a letter in the mailbox. The sender was Robert. Emily hesitated, but opened the letter. To Emily. "The crime I committed can never be forgiven. However, while receiving treatment, I have come to understand how terrible my actions were. I sincerely apologize to Jacob, Margaret, and you. I will never harm my family again. Please live happily. Robert." After reading the letter, Emily took a deep breath. Then she threw the letter into the fireplace fire. She would accept the past as the past, but would not be trapped by it. That night, the three sat on the sofa watching Jacob's favorite animated movie. Her son was sleeping on Margaret's lap, and Emily was resting her head on her mother's shoulder. "Mom," Emily said in a small voice. "We've become a real family." "Yes," Margaret gently stroked her daughter's hair. "Family isn't just about blood relations. People who love each other, support each other, and share the truth with each other, those are family." Outside the window, spring rain was falling quietly. It was gentle rain announcing the beginning of a new season. In the small house of the three, warm light was lit, and laughter filled with genuine love echoed. A true family is not bound by secrets or fear. It consists of people who understand each other's pain, overcome difficulties together, and are connected by unconditional love. Emily, Jacob, and Margaret had learned this through their own experience. And now, as a family in the true sense of the word, they were beginning to walk a new life.